The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the Grand Meridian Hotel's private dining room, where 200 of the city's most influential people would gather tomorrow for what my family believed would be the social event of the year. I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, quietly observing my family's animated discussions about wedding preparations, catering details, and the guest list that read like a who's who of local politics and business. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had no idea who actually owned every gleaming surface they were so proud to be celebrating in. "Emma, darling," my Aunt Patricia's voice cut through the chatter like a knife wrapped in silk, "you've been so quiet tonight. Surely you're excited about tomorrow? Michael's wedding will be the talk of the city for months." The entire table turned to look at me. 23 family members, all dressed in designer clothes that cost more than most people's monthly salaries, all wearing expressions that ranged from mild curiosity to barely concealed condescension. I was wearing a simple black dress from Target, my hair pulled back in a basic ponytail, my only jewelry a simple watch that looked like it came from a department store clearance rack. To them, I was the family disappointment. The 29-year-old who'd never quite figured her life out, who worked at some vague marketing job, and lived in what they dismissively called that tiny apartment downtown. The one who drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic and bought her clothes at discount stores. The one who'd been systematically excluded from wedding planning discussions because, as my mother had delicately put it, Emma's situation is so different from ours. "I'm very happy for Michael and Sarah," I replied softly, taking a sip of water while they drank champagne that cost more per bottle than my monthly car payment. Michael, resplendent in his custom-tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than my supposed annual income, leaned back in his chair with the confident smile of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. "You know, Em, I've been meaning to ask, what did you end up getting us for a wedding gift? I know money's tight for you, but Sarah and I are really curious." The question hung in the air like smoke. Conversations at nearby tables. Yes, there were multiple tables because this rehearsal dinner was larger than most people's actual weddings, seemed to pause as family members strained to hear my answer. Sarah, his bride-to-be, giggled behind her perfectly manicured hand. Her engagement ring caught the light, a 5-carat diamond that had been featured in the society pages of 3 different newspapers. "Oh, Michael, don't put her on the spot. I'm sure Emma did her best with whatever she could afford." My cousin Bradley, 26 and fresh out of law school with a job at his father's firm, couldn't resist chiming in. "Come on, don't keep us in suspense, Emma. What's the big gift? Please tell me it's not another one of those homemade photo albums you used to give us." The laughter that rippled around the table was polite but unmistakably cruel. My mother shot Bradley a warning look, but she was smiling too. Even my father, usually the most diplomatic of the family, was grinning into his brandy snifter. "Actually," I said, setting down my water glass and meeting Michael's eyes directly, "I was thinking of keeping it simple. Maybe just a card like you suggested." The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds before the eruption began. Michael nearly choked on his champagne. "A card? Emma, this isn't a birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese. This is my wedding. Do you see where we are right now?" He gestured grandly at the opulent surroundings. "This is the Grand Meridian Hotel, the most exclusive venue in the city. Sarah's father had to call in favors just to get us this booking." "Now, Michael," my father interjected, though his tone suggested he agreed entirely with the sentiment, "I'm sure Emma didn't mean—" "No, Dad, she needs to hear this," Michael continued, his voice rising slightly as the champagne and the audience emboldened him. "Emma, you can't just coast through life forever. Look around this table. Uncle Richard just made partner at Morrison & Associates. Bradley's starting at Patterson Commercial Real Estate. Cousin Jennifer just got promoted to Senior Vice President at First National Bank. Even our youngest cousin Amy just landed an internship at the mayor's office." He paused for effect, making sure everyone was listening. "And tomorrow Sarah and I will be celebrating our marriage with judges, senators, city council members, business owners who control millions of dollars in commerce. Sarah's father owns half the commercial real estate in this city. Her mother sits on the boards of 4 different charities and the symphony orchestra." Sarah beamed at this recitation of her family's accomplishments. "My parents have been planning this wedding for 8 months. The flowers alone cost more than most people spend on their entire wedding. We have a 12-piece orchestra, not a DJ. The cake was designed by the same pastry chef who did the governor's daughter's wedding last year. And you think," Michael continued, building to his crescendo, that a card fits into that world? Into our world. I nodded thoughtfully as if seriously considering his question. You make an excellent point, Michael. A card does seem rather insufficient for such a grand occasion. Finally, my Aunt Patricia muttered under her breath, loud enough for the table to hear, some self-awareness. You know what your problem is, Emma? This came from my Uncle Richard, Patricia's husband, who'd been drinking heavily and was feeling philosophical. You never learned to think big. You're content with your little life, your little apartment, your little job. There's nothing wrong with that, mind you, but you can't expect to run with wolves when you're determined to stay a sheep. More laughter. Even my mother was nodding approvingly at this bit of wisdom. I pulled out my phone, a gesture that made several family members roll their eyes. My phone was 3 years old with a cracked screen protector I'd never bothered to replace. To them, it was just another symbol of my failure to keep up with their standards. Always on that thing, Bradley observed. Who could possibly be calling you at 9:30 on a Friday night? Let me guess. Someone from your little marketing company wants to discuss weekend overtime. Actually, I said, standing up from the table, I need to make a call. I think you're absolutely right about the card being insufficient. The entire dining room had gone quiet now. Not just our table but the other tables of family and wedding party members. Even the piano player in the corner seemed to sense the tension and let his melody fade into silence. I dialed a number I knew by heart, watching their faces as I waited for the answer. Hello, James. Yes, I know it's late, but we have a situation at the Grand Meridian that requires immediate attention. No, not that kind of situation. Nothing dangerous. I need you to cancel the Henderson wedding scheduled for tomorrow. Yes, all of it. The ceremony at 3, the cocktail hour at 5, the reception at 7. Everything. I don't care about the deposits or the contracts. Just handle it. The color began draining from faces around the table, starting with Michael and spreading outward like ripples in a pond. Emma, my mother whispered, her voice barely audible, what are you doing? Who are you talking to? I held up a finger, continuing my conversation. And James? I want you to personally deliver the cancellation notice to the bride's suite tonight. Make sure they understand this isn't a staffing issue or a scheduling conflict. Make it clear that this comes directly from ownership. Yes, from Grandstone Hospitality Group. Tell them the owner felt that the behavior of the wedding party toward hotel staff was unacceptable. What's that? Oh yes, you can include that detail about inappropriate conduct toward family members as well. Thank you, James. I hung up and smiled at the table full of horrified faces. There. I think that's a much more memorable wedding gift than a card, don't you? Emma, my father's voice was barely controlled. What did you just do? I gave Michael and Sarah exactly what they asked for, I replied, sitting back down and smoothing my discount dress. Michael said a card wasn't good enough for the Grand Meridian's standards. So I made sure they wouldn't have to worry about meeting those standards anymore. Sarah stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward, crashing to the floor with a sound that echoed through the now silent room. You can't cancel our wedding. You can't just call some random hotel employee in. Hotel employee? I looked genuinely puzzled. Oh, Sarah, I think there's been a misunderstanding. James Richardson isn't a hotel employee. He's the CEO of Grandstone Hospitality Group. Grandstone. Uncle Richard's voice trailed off as the implications began to sink in. They own this hotel, I explained patiently as if speaking to children. Along with 17 other luxury properties across 3 states, 2 resorts in the Caribbean, and a rather lovely chateau in France that I'm quite fond of. You'd be familiar with some of their other properties. The Grandstone Plaza downtown, the Meridian Resort where you vacationed last summer, the Ocean View Conference Center where your law firm holds its annual retreats. The silence that followed was so complete that you could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning system and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. That's impossible, my Aunt Patricia finally whispered. You work at a marketing firm. You live in that tiny apartment. You drive that awful car. I own a marketing firm, I corrected gently. Phoenix Digital Solutions. We handle comprehensive digital strategy for hospitality groups, luxury brands, and real estate developers nationwide. Our client list includes about 60% of the major hotel chains in North America, which is how I met James Richardson 5 years ago. I paused to take another sip of water, enjoying the way their faces were cycling through various stages of shock and disbelief. James was so impressed with our work. We increased Grandstone's direct bookings by 340% in our first year, that when they were looking for investors 3 years ago, he offered me the opportunity to buy in. I liked their vision for luxury hospitality, so I acquired a controlling stake. 63% to be exact. Michael's mouth was opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. You own, but that's. As for the tiny apartment, I continued conversationally, that's actually a 12-story office building in the financial district. Phoenix Digital Solutions occupies floors 3 through 8. I live in the penthouse. It's about 4,500 square feet, though I suppose that might seem tiny compared to some people's standards. My mother was shaking her head frantically, as if she could make this all go away through sheer force of denial. Emma, this is insane. This is some kind of elaborate joke. You can't possibly own a hotel chain. Look at your clothes. Look at your car. The clothes are from Target, you're absolutely right, I agreed. I find them comfortable and practical. As for the car, well, that Honda Civic belongs to my assistant, Rebecca. She lets me borrow it when I visit family because I prefer to keep a low profile. It helps me see who people really are when they think I have nothing to offer them. James Richardson himself appeared at our table as if summoned by our conversation. He was immaculate in his evening suit despite the late hour, his silver hair perfectly styled, his manner professionally courteous but unmistakably authoritative. Ms. Martinez, he said with a slight bow, I came personally to ensure everything was handled according to your instructions. The Henderson wedding has been completely cancelled. All vendors have been notified, all deposits will be returned by Monday morning, and I've prepared a comprehensive guest notification system. Shall I proceed with the automated calls and emails? Please do, James. Make sure everyone understands that the cancellation came from ownership due to inappropriate behavior towards staff and other guests. Of course. And shall I prepare the Ocean View Ballroom for your corporate event tomorrow instead? I believe you mentioned wanting to host something for your West Coast marketing clients who are flying in for the quarterly review. Perfect. Make sure the catering reflects the seasonal menu we discussed, and confirm that the AV equipment for the presentation is properly calibrated. Already handled, Ms. Martinez. Will there be anything else? Actually, yes. I'd like you to comp these ladies and gentlemen's dinner tonight. Call it a cancellation courtesy. James bowed again. My pleasure. Have a wonderful evening. As he walked away, I turned back to my family. 23 faces staring at me in various stages of shock, disbelief, anger, and calculation. Michael looked like he might vomit. Sarah was frantically texting, probably trying to reach her father. My parents sat in stunned silence, finally understanding that their disappointing daughter had more power in her little finger than they'd ever dreamed possible. You see, I continued conversationally, when you build a business from the ground up, you learn the value of staying humble. I started Phoenix Digital in what you call that tiny apartment. Back when it actually was tiny, a studio above a coffee shop that I rented for $800 a month. I could see some of them starting to do mental math, trying to figure out how someone could go from a studio apartment to owning hotel chains in just a few years. I worked 18-hour days, lived on ramen noodles and whatever free food I could get from networking events. I wore the same 3 outfits to every client meeting for 2 years because I was reinvesting every penny back into the business. But I learned something valuable during those years. Success isn't about what you show off to other people. It's about what you build when no one is watching. Emma. Michael's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know. How could we have known? You never said anything about. About what? I asked. About the fact that Phoenix Digital went public 18 months ago and is now valued at $1.2 billion? About the fact that Forbes listed me as one of their 30 under 30-foot entrepreneurs 3 years running? About the fact that I've been invited to speak at Harvard Business School, Stanford, and Wharton about digital transformation in the hospitality industry. The number seemed to hit them like a physical blow. Several people actually flinched. You could have asked, I continued. You could have shown even the slightest interest in my life beyond making jokes about my clothes or my car or my supposed failure to launch. You could have treated me like family instead of like a charity case you're embarrassed to be associated with. Sarah suddenly grabbed my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin. Wait, you can't do this. This is my wedding. 3 years of planning. My father will destroy you. He owns Patterson Commercial Real Estate. He has connections throughout this city. I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm. Patterson Commercial? How interesting. They manage the Riverside complex where my original office was located, before I bought my own building. Small world. Her face went from flushed anger to ashen panic in the space of a heartbeat. What do you mean? Well, I'm sure your father is a lovely man, but Patterson Commercial was charging me triple the market rate for substandard service. Broken elevators, inconsistent heating, security issues. When I started looking into it, I discovered they were doing the same thing to most of their tenants. So when my lease was up, I bought my own building. And I may have mentioned to a few other business owners that they might want to explore their options. You're lying, Sarah whispered. Patterson Commercial lost about 40% of their major tenants over the past 2 years, I continued matter-of-factly, including, coincidentally, the management contract for several Grandstone properties. Turns out they were billing us for services they weren't actually providing. James was quite upset when our audit revealed the discrepancies. The blood drained completely from Sarah's face. Her father's business had indeed been struggling lately, though the family had been trying to keep it quiet. My father finally found his voice. Emma, sweetheart, surely we can work this out. Michael didn't mean anything by what he said. We're family. You can't just destroy a wedding over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I repeated. Dad, this isn't about one comment at one dinner. This is about 29 years of being treated like the family disappointment. This is about being excluded from family decisions because you assumed I had nothing valuable to contribute. This is about being mocked and dismissed and patronized at every family gathering for the past decade. But we didn't know, my mother protested. If you had told us about your success, would it have mattered? I asked. Should your respect for me as a person depend on how much money I have in the bank? Should the way you treat your daughter be contingent on her net worth? The question hung in the air like an accusation because we all knew the answer. Bradley, who had been silent since his earlier joke about photo albums, suddenly spoke up. But the wedding, Emma. There are 200 guests coming tomorrow. Senators, judges, business leaders. This will humiliate our entire family. Will it? I asked. Or will it teach you something about consequences? About how you treat people when you think they can't fight back? Michael suddenly stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. You know what? Fine. You want to play power games? You want to show off your money? Go ahead. Cancel the wedding. But don't pretend this is about respect or family values. You're getting revenge because we didn't treat you like the secret billionaire you apparently are. I'm worth $3.7 billion actually, I corrected quietly. The number landed like a bomb in the middle of the table. Even the servers who had been discreetly clearing dishes stopped moving. What? Sarah breathed. Phoenix Digital was just the beginning. The IPO gave me the capital to expand into other markets. Real estate development, renewable energy, tech startups. The hospitality acquisition was actually one of my smaller investments. Forbes' estimate last month was $3.7 billion, though their methodology tends to be conservative. My Aunt Patricia made a sound like a punctured tire. Billion. With a B. The funny thing is, I continued, standing up and gathering my discount purse, I was actually planning to give you a very generous wedding gift. I'd arranged for a month-long honeymoon in Europe. My villa in Tuscany, my apartment in Paris, a yacht charter in the Mediterranean. I thought it would be a nice surprise. You have a villa in Tuscany? My mother whispered. 3 villas, actually. Tuscany, Provence, and a lovely place in the Cotswolds. But the Tuscany property has the best views of the vineyard. Or it had the best views for your honeymoon. I'm thinking of hosting a corporate retreat there instead. My marketing team has been working very hard lately. Sarah burst into tears, her carefully applied makeup running in black streams down her cheeks. This isn't fair. You can't punish us for not knowing you were rich. How are we supposed to know? I'm not punishing you for not knowing I was rich, I said, slinging my Target purse over my shoulder. I'm punishing you for treating me like garbage when you thought I was poor. There's a significant difference. Michael grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. Emma, please. I'm sorry. We're all sorry. Can't we just start over? Forget tonight happened. I looked around the table at their desperate faces. These people who had spent years making me feel small, unwanted, unsuccessful. Who had treated me like an embarrassment to the family name. Who had excluded me from important conversations and mocked my lifestyle choices and dismissed my opinions because they assumed I had nothing valuable to offer. You want to start over? I asked. Here's how we start over. Tomorrow, instead of your wedding, you're all going to volunteer at the Haven House homeless shelter on 5th Street. A homeless shelter? Patricia looked like I'd suggested they volunteer at a sewage treatment plant. Every Saturday for the next 6 months. All of you. You're going to serve meals, clean bathrooms, sort donations, and listen to stories from people who have nothing but still treat each other with dignity and respect. People who understand that a person's worth isn't determined by their bank account or their zip code or the label on their clothes. And if we refuse? Michael asked, though his defiance was considerably less impressive than it had been an hour ago. I smiled. Then you refuse. It's your choice. But understand that my choice is to never speak to any of you again. No family dinners, no holiday gatherings, no graduations or births or funerals. You'll be strangers to me. And given that I now control significant portions of this city's hospitality and real estate markets, that might make certain social and business situations rather awkward for you. The weight of that threat settled over them like a blanket. For all their dismissive treatment of me, I was still family. Still their daughter, sister, niece, cousin. And now, apparently, their only family member with any real power in the circles they cared about. 6 months at the shelter, my father said slowly, his voice carefully controlled. And then what happens? And then we see if you've learned anything about treating people with respect, regardless of what car they drive or what clothes they wear or what job they have. We see if you're capable of valuing family relationships over social status. Sarah wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara even further. What about our wedding? We can't just not get married. The invitations, the plans, the deposits. You can absolutely still get married, I said. Just not at my hotel. I'm sure you can find a nice little chapel somewhere. Something more appropriate for people who are just learning about humility. A chapel? She looked horrified. There's a lovely little place called St. Mary's about 10 minutes from here. Very intimate. Probably perfect for, say, 20 or 30 of your closest family and friends instead of 200 social climbers and business contacts. 20 or 30? Michael looked like he might faint. Well, yes. I assume most of tomorrow's guest list was more interested in networking and being seen at the social event of the season than in actually celebrating your marriage. Once word gets out that the Grand Meridian wedding is cancelled, I suspect you'll discover who your real friends are. I started walking toward the exit, my discount shoes silent on the plush carpet. Behind me, I could hear Sarah sobbing and Michael frantically making phone calls, probably trying to find another venue at 10 p.m. for a wedding the next day. Emma, my mother called out as I reached the dining room door. This isn't you. You're not cruel. You've always been the sweet one, the kind one. I turned back one last time. You're right, Mom. The old Emma, the one who let you walk all over her because she was desperate for your approval, wasn't cruel. But she also wasn't respected. She was treated like a doormat because she was afraid to stand up for herself. So this is who you really are? Michael had followed me to the door, his face red with anger and humiliation. Some vindictive billionaire who destroys people's lives for entertainment? No, Michael. This is who you forced me to become. You wanted to know what I was really worth, what I could really contribute to this family. Well, now you know. I walked out of the Grand Meridian Hotel, my hotel, into the cool evening air. The valet, recognizing me despite my humble appearance, had already brought around my actual car, a midnight blue Bentley Continental that cost more than most people's houses. As I drove through the city streets toward my penthouse, my phone buzzed constantly with frantic calls and texts from various family members. But I ignored them all. Tomorrow would be very interesting indeed. 6 months later I got my answer. They had all shown up at Haven House that first Saturday, initially sullen and resentful, dressed inappropriately and clearly miserable about the whole arrangement. But something remarkable happened over those 26 weeks. They started talking to the people they were serving. They started hearing stories about families who'd lost everything through medical bankruptcies, veterans struggling with PTSD, single mothers working 3 jobs and still unable to afford rent. My father surprised me most. The proud businessman who'd always looked down on charity work became one of the shelter's most dedicated volunteers. He'd started a job training program, using his business connections to help homeless individuals find employment. He'd even hired 2 former residents at his company, something that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. Michael and Sarah had indeed gotten married at St. Mary's Chapel the day after their Grand Meridian cancellation. 28 guests instead of 200, a simple reception in the church hall instead of a grand ballroom. Sarah later told me it was the most meaningful day of her life, focused on love and family instead of social status and business networking. At our first family dinner in over a year, held at Haven House, not some fancy restaurant, Michael approached me quietly as we served meals to families who reminded us all what was really important. "Emma, I need to apologize. Not just for that night at the hotel, but for years of treating you like you didn't matter. I was so focused on what success looked like that I never bothered to see what it actually was." "And what is it?" I asked, ladling soup into bowls. "It's making a difference. It's building something that matters. It's treating people well because they're human beings, not because of what they can do for you." He paused, watching a homeless veteran teach my cousin Bradley how to properly organize the food pantry. "You were successful all along. We were just too blind and self-absorbed to see it." I smiled at my brother, really smiled at him for the first time in years. The villa in Tuscany is still available. If you and Sarah want to take that belated honeymoon, consider it a wedding gift. Better late than never. As we cleaned up after the evening meal service, watching families with nothing share what little they had with gratitude and grace, I realized something important. I'd thought I was teaching my family about respect and consequences, but they taught me something equally valuable. Real success isn't about accumulating wealth or building business empires or wielding power over others. It's about using whatever advantages you have to lift people up, not tear them down. Even when they probably deserve the tearing down. But especially when they don't.